Okay, back here in Portland, and back also into the place I was yesterday where I'm having to make multiple takes. So this is now the third take. The first take was interrupted by a phone call from my wife, so I remembered I need to unplug the phone. The second one by this strange thing that's happening where there's an interruption in the connection. So I'm going to cut to the chase, and I'm going to get right to reading 470121.02, which was originally written in February the 21st, 2004, 10 years ago to this day. Picking it up where I left off yesterday, which was on the tidings of the tide and the claim that's made upon us by the word nothing. The word nothing claims us because its address irritates the expectation of our thinking. We see or hear this word as a part of a question that relates us to this phenomena, and asks us about this question, and we are immediately thrown. The question throws us because it presumes that we know something of this relationship with the nothing. Yet, the question, in throwing us, does not push us back into ourselves, into the subjectivism of reflection or even recollection. The question supposes we are in an ongoing and active relation with the nothing. And it is first and foremost this supposition that throws us. For how can we respond to a question when we know not about what is being asked? We know not about this relation with the nothing. But herein lies the first aspect of the claim that this question makes on us. The claim as a message delivers the tidings, as in the news, that we are located in a relationship with that which we have no knowledge. This news is confounding because we sense ourselves to have forgotten something. How could we overlook such a relationship? A natural reaction to such a claim is one of annoyance and irritation. This question we feel is presumptuous and outrageous. It takes on the manner of a cross-examination. We're annoyed by this question because it doesn't sit well with our expectations. This news we are receiving cuts against what we have looked forward to, have always looked forward to, what we in our thinking and being regard as certain or likely to happen. We have been taught to anticipate progress as the ever-growing, ever-expanding harvest of our existence. Forward, positive movement guaranteed by a system of knowledge that can decide the merits of the saying and the said of any question by simply asking, what difference will it make in the world? But this system cannot handle a question that calls into question the very world upon which the system itself believes itself to be rooted. The question, how is it with the nothing, floods over that world and uproots the system from its ground. We have certain expectations and anticipate to build upon what we know and have known to be the case. This continuity is due to us, and we recoil from the discontinuity or rupture that comes about when we are held in abeyance by a claim that contradicts the direct evidence of our experience. The question, in making a claim about who we are, ruptures the continuity of our experience and holds us in a state of abeyance. As such, we're held back, suspended. The question claims us in claiming we have a relation with the nothing. What does it claim with this claim? By holding us in abeyance, it claims our judgment. It silences the juridical voice. It renders pacific that incessant chatter of adjudication and measure. We are silenced by the tidings from the tide, which we have forgotten. The news silences us, and we find ourselves quiescent, at rest, still, inert, dormant, tranquil, calm, free from anxiety, agitation, or emotion. When we heed the saying of the said nothing, we find ourselves caught and released by the tidings from the tide. Okay, so an unusual conclusion, at least insofar as I have been concluding all of the meditations with a question. But I concluded by coming back to, I suppose, an assertion or a sort of summation when we heed the saying of the said, nothing, we find ourselves caught and released by the tidings from the tide. So I come back to, in a way, a summation, but it's really just a sort of a general, almost poetic, or because it still remains at the level of the abstract. So I've filled in the empty concept, to use a Hegelian idea, the empty concept of the tide in this meditation, but I sort of empty it out at the end, which is another version of ending with the question, I would say. So this was a fun meditation. I seem to have had a lot of spirit in writing this one, insofar as there's a real sense of the emotion that's tied up with the question, how is it with the nothing? That this question is annoying us because it doesn't set well with our expectations. How is it with the nothing? How is it with the nothing? How is it with something I don't know? So it's a play there, because it's suggesting, how is it with your house? How is it with the job? How is it with whatever you do? Right? So it's a sense in which the question, how is it, seems to come across as presuming familiarity. You're asked how it is with something that you are involved with, that you can respond to because you know about it. How's it going with that? But how is it with the nothing is, from a more general philosophical perspective, the fundamental question, how is it with being? How is it with the presencing of being? How is it with your relationship with the world, generally speaking? How is it? It's a fundamental existential question. How is it with the nothing? But it's an irritating question from a very sort of pedestrian, terrestrial, everyday, common sense way. When you say, how's it with the nothing? The question is just an odd question to begin with, of course. So it's one selected. But in a certain sense, it's an irritating question because it is not something we can grasp onto. It throws us off. And what I'm suggesting here is that it just cuts right to the heart of the logic of the expectations, specifically in education. So, the context for a lot of this work, philosophical work, is my role in the field of education, right? Teaching in a college of education, which is defined as teacher preparation, either initial or ongoing preparation. That's the heart and the matter of the work that's going on in the College of Education at Hofstra. I'm wearing my colors today, having just gotten back from the gym and not having yet taken off the old trusty hoodie. So the context in which this is going on, of course, is the work happening as a teacher and a scholar in the field of education, specifically in professional training, ongoing work with people in schools. So the question, how's it with the nothing, and the figure of the scientist are all meant to engage that context. It's a form of critique, if you will. And that's why I think towards the end, and I'll come back to this, I end by saying that the claim of the word nothing, the dictum, nothing, and the question, how is it with the nothing, by talking about claiming, or by describing this question as claiming us, right, which is a form of being's presence in claiming us, I now introduce this notion that by claiming us, it's claiming our judgment. But not judgment in this sense that I've already talked about. I think I talked about it yesterday in light of Arendt, right? It's not judgment as in our capacity to do ethics. It's judgment as judgmentalism or being judgmental, which is what I call the juridical voice, right? And that's why I call it the incessant chatter of adjudication and measure. The incessant chatter of adjudication and measure is precisely a description of the forms of the logic of outcomes-based education, the logic of the dominant policies in schooling that have made their way into all forms of institutionalized education. Right? The incessant chatter of adjudication and measure are all of these policies that are insisting in what's called performativity, right? Demonstrating that one is doing something that is measuring up to a specific outcome that's been identified, not even so much by the teacher, by the educator, but by some uber structure. So the claim of the question, how is it with the nothing, is a claim that silences and renders pacific the incessant chatter of adjudication and measure. It silences what we could call instrumental reasoning, if you will, to use an old Frankfurt School term, right? It silences the juridical. And so the claim of being's presencing claims us and throws us elsewhere and outside of that dominant logic that we find ourselves in. So even in my comments, it's interesting, I'm sort of taking it outside of perhaps the spirit, not necessarily the spirit, but the language, the poetic, phenomenological situation, and really emphasizing today in my commentary the larger context and how this work is a leap of faith beyond and outside of this dominant context. So, until the next meditation.